God is about to free his people from slavery in Egypt. There had been 9 plagues up until this time to soften Pharaoh up so that he would release his people. And now we're about to come to the 10th. And God instructs them to eat a certain meal, to smear the blood of the lamb on the doorpost, and a little to warn away the avenging angel. And he asks them to repeat this same sacrifice every year, lest they forget how much he loves them and how much he has done for them in freeing them from slavery.
A reading from the book of Exodus. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell the whole congregation of Israel that on the 10th of this month they are to take a lamb for each family, a lamb for each household. If a household is too small for a whole lamb, it shall join its closest neighbor in attaining one. The lamb shall be divided in proportion to the number of people who eat of it. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a year-old male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it until the 14th day of this month. Then the whole assembled congregation of Israel shall slaughter it at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. They shall eat the lamb that same night. They shall eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs." Please go to verse 11. "This is how you shall eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it hurriedly. It is the Passover of the Lord. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both human beings and animals. On all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you live. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague shall destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be a day of remembrance for you. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord. Throughout your generations, you shall observe it as a perpetual ordinance." The word of the Lord.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Lord.
Before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, to wipe them with the towel that had been tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" And Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." And Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash, except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you. For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, not all of you are clean. After he had washed their feet, he put on his robe and had returned to the table and said to them, do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also must wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example that you also should do as I have done to you. The Gospel of the Lord.
I think this feast day and this gospel kind of crowns Jesus as the Lord of change. Most of us don't like change a whole lot, depending on what it may be. If we get a new car, that's kind of neat. If we got the latest smartphone, that's pretty cool. But if it's threatening to change our innards, the way we think, the way we act, the way we feel, what we believe, we're pretty resistant. So Jesus started out in his public life rather nicely. What we think of as his first miracle, he changed the water into wine at the wedding feast of Cana. That was pretty popular, I imagine. Later on, he would cure people, make the sick well. He changed the blind so that they could see. He changed the deaf so that they could hear. He changed the leprous so that they were clean. He even changed dead people into living people. That was, I'm sure, well accepted. But then he starts changing a few other things. In the sacred meal that they were eating that evening, at what we call the Last Supper, he took bread and said, "This is my body." He changed the bread into his own flesh and blood. He changed the wine into his blood. He changed more and more things. He changed the law so that it was not just a series of regulations of do's and don'ts, not just 10 commandments or 613 precepts, but now it was a business of simply loving God by loving one another. And one another included everybody: the rich, the poor, the ill, the suffering, the oppressed, whoever they may be. He said, we must be of service. And then he did something to show what he meant. He washed feet. That's something we find, well, strange to our culture, but it's also difficult for us to change so that we really respect everyone and are servants to one another. And it's something that we haven't learned completely, I'm sure, nor has our church learned completely. We're all still struggling. But in an attempt to demonstrate that we try to be serious about changing ourselves and our hearts and putting ourselves at the service of one another, we've invited several people to come up here and occupy these chairs and have their feet washed. And so I'm inviting those people now to come forward, have a seat, remove a shoe, and be ready.